Picture this. You're settling in for a Friday night movie. Maybe it's the latest Tom Hanks historical drama, or perhaps you're binge watching that gripping CIA thriller everyone's talking about. The popcorn is ready, the lights are dimmed, and you're prepared to be entertained. But what if I told you that what you're about to watch isn't just entertainment? What if the very stories unfolding on your screen have been carefully crafted, shaped, and sometimes even written by one of America's most secretive agencies? Welcome to American Scandal Report. I'm your host, Oz Dalton, and today we will deep dive into one of the most fascinating and disturbing relationships in modern America, the intimate partnership between Hollywood and the CIA. This isn't your typical conspiracy theory podcast episode. This is about documented collaborations, real meetings, actual influence campaigns that have been shaping how you see the world through the movies and TV shows you love. Over the next hour, we're going to pull back the curtain on a machine that's been operating in plain sight for decades. We'll discover how America's intelligence apparatus learned to weaponize entertainment, turning your living room into a battlefield for hearts and minds. And trust me, by the end of this episode, you'll never watch a spy thriller the same way again. If unraveling gripping scandals and untold stories lights up your curiosity, then you need to check out American Scandal Report by Skoob, an AI powered podcast app that delivers short, binge worthy episodes tailored to your true crime and history interests. From political intrigue and corporate corruption to cultural cover ups, American Scandal Report makes exploring scandals fast, fascinating, and impossible to stop listening to. Plus, we'll ask the hard questions: what really happened behind closed doors, and who got away with it? Download American Scandal Report from the App Store or Play Store and change the way you dive into America's darkest secrets and the stories behind them. Let's start our story in the aftermath of September 11th, 2001. The Twin Towers have fallen, the Pentagon is damaged, and America is reeling from the most devastating intelligence failure in its modern history. The CIA, that shadowy organization that was supposed to keep America safe, had failed spectacularly, and everyone knew it. Picture the mood inside Langley in those dark days. The agency that had spent decades cultivating an image of omniscience and competence was suddenly exposed as fallible, human, and worst of all, ineffective. Between September 1st and October 10th, 2002, as Congress prepared to vote on the authorization for war in Iraq, the Joint Inquiry Committee held 12 hearings focused exclusively on intelligence shortcomings related to September 11th. 12 hearings where CIA officials had to sit in uncomfortable chairs and explain to angry senators how they'd missed the biggest threat to American soil since Pearl Harbor. This was an agency in crisis. The CIA faced intense scrutiny and criticism that significantly diminished its political standing. There was bipartisan criticism flowing from every corner of Washington. The agency that had once whispered in presidents' ears and toppled governments was suddenly fighting for relevance in the corridors of power. And desperate times call for desperate measures. Eager to reclaim its standing with the political establishment, the CIA became willing to yield to pressure from the White House. They released questionable intelligence reports that incorrectly asserted Saddam Hussein's regime possessed an arsenal of weapons of mass destruction. Sound familiar? Those flawed intelligence reports laid the groundwork for a war that would later be heavily criticized and cost thousands of American lives. But here's where our story takes an interesting turn. Because while the CIA was scrambling to maintain its political relevance in Washington, someone at Langley had a brilliant idea. Why fight for respectability in the halls of Congress when you can create it in the theaters of America? This is where we meet one of the most intriguing figures in our story, Chase Brandon. Brandon wasn't your typical CIA operative. He was the agency's entertainment liaison officer, a man whose job it was to make the CIA look good on screen. And brother, was he busy? Brandon's fingerprints were all over Hollywood in the 2000s. He consulted on The Recruit, The Sum of All Fears, Enemy of the State, Bad Company, and In the Company of Spies. He provided uncredited assistance to productions like Alias, JAG, The Agency, Mission Impossible, and even 24. The man was like the CIA's version of a Hollywood super agent, except instead of negotiating contracts, he was negotiating America's perception of its intelligence community. Let's zoom in on one specific example that perfectly illustrates how this machine worked. Remember The Sum of All Fears? That 2002 thriller starring Ben Affleck as CIA analyst Jack Ryan. Great movie, right? Tense, realistic, patriotic. Well, that realism wasn't an accident. In a press release distributed by Paramount Pictures, Chase Brandon was asked about the believability of the movie's premise. Brandon didn't just endorse it, he used it as a platform to make the CIA's case to the American people. He explained that during the Cold War, the CIA had it easy. They just had to focus on one big threat, the Soviet Union. But now the world was like a jungle populated with venomous snakes. These threats range from weapons of mass destruction to rogue nation states. Here's the brilliant part. Brandon argued that this transformation had made the CIA more important than ever before. He claimed that the sum of all fears effectively highlighted this idea with both remarkable accuracy and drama. The film, he said, captured how angry, frustrated, and intelligent individuals could use various technologies to cause significant harm to the United States and potentially destabilize its economy. Do you see what's happening here? Brandon wasn't just consulting on a movie. He was using the movie as a vehicle to argue for the CIA's continued relevance and funding. He was turning entertainment into advocacy. Critics like Charles Taylor noted that although the film might seem far-fetched and sensationalist, its promotion of comprehensive intelligence solutions lent it greater credibility. Even legendary film critic Roger Ebert got caught up in the message. He observed that in the troubled times of the early 2000s, the film didn't function as mere entertainment, but as a validation of fears about impending global disasters. Brandon had successfully transformed a Hollywood thriller into a recruiting poster for American intelligence. Now let's talk about the big fish. When we discuss Hollywood's relationship with Washington, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Tom Hanks, America's dad, the man who made us cry in Forrest Gump and cheer in Apollo 13. But Hanks represents something much more significant in our story than just a beloved actor. Through his production company, Playtone, which he owns with Gary Gertzman, Hanks has become one of the most powerful shapers of American historical narrative in Hollywood. And here's the thing that should make you pause. These are two men who grew up during the turbulent 1960s, yet they consistently endorse narratives in film that echo the simplistic nationalism of mainstream media. Think about Hanks's filmography for a moment. Moon landings, World War II heroes, inspiring tales based on historians like Stephen Ambrose and David McCullough. Notice what's missing? Any serious challenge to official US historical narratives. It's as if the messy, complicated, controversial aspects of American history simply don't exist in the Hanks universe. This becomes particularly interesting when we consider Playtone's acquisition of film rights to Vincent Bugliosi's Reclaiming History, a massive tome defending the official Warren Commission account of the Kennedy assassination. Here we have a production company owned by two men who lived through the conspiracy-haunted 1960s, yet they're committed to promoting the government's version of events. From Playtone's perspective, the contentious elements of history, Watergate, Iran-Contra, alleged CIA involvement in drug smuggling during various US military operations, these inconvenient truths are either erased or given a palatable facelift for mass consumption. The CIA emerges in their productions as a benign entity, divorced from any real controversy. But here's what makes this particularly fascinating. Hanks seems genuinely convinced that he's contributing authentic insights to the public's understanding. This isn't necessarily cynical manipulation. It might be something more subtle and therefore more powerful, the unconscious perpetuation of certain ideological perspectives through selective storytelling. Let me tell you about one of the most revealing cases in our investigation, the CBS television series The Agency. This show, which aired from 2001 to 2003, gives us a perfect window into how deep the CIA's influence can penetrate the entertainment industry. On the surface, the CIA's involvement seemed limited. Records indicate that the agency and Chase Brandon were not formally involved beyond the pilot episode. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because what happened behind the scenes reveals a level of influence that's both subtle and profound. The show's creator, Michael Beckner, developed what he described as a lasting friendship with Chase Brandon through their initial interactions. And this friendship became a pipeline for CIA influence that was almost impossible to categorize or regulate. Beckner would occasionally consult Brandon about the plausibility of various elements he was writing, while Brandon would spontaneously suggest storylines for consideration. Now, here's the crucial part. Beckner remarked on the informal nature of their exchanges, noting the challenge of categorizing them as official CIA Hollywood interactions. This difficulty arises because the CIA has perfected a way of conveying what they want without making it feel like overt governmental communication. It's influence that doesn't leave fingerprints, but the results speak for themselves. These casual conversations significantly influenced the development of several first season storylines. And get this, Beckner created storylines that seemed to predict the future with uncanny accuracy. The pilot episode centered around bin Laden launching attacks on the West, sparking a reinvigorated CIA-led war on terrorism. When real-life parallels occurred just 2 weeks before the pilot was scheduled to air, that episode was postponed. Coincidence? Maybe. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Beckner crafted an episode involving a Predator drone fitted with a Hellfire missile, enabling a remote attack on a Pakistani general. He wrote another episode depicting an anthrax attack targeting Americans. A third involved a Russian suitcase bomb stolen from the former USSR. These scenarios materialized shortly before or after the broadcasts, with the anthrax episode being pulled when real anthrax mail attacks occurred on the very day it was supposed to air. When asked about this prescient storytelling, Beckner attributed it to his informal conversations with Chase Brandon. Several plot lines, he claimed, stemmed directly from ideas pitched by Chase during their talks. In essence, the CIA was feeding story ideas to primetime television, and those ideas were becoming reality. If jaw-dropping secrets behind America's biggest scandals excite you, American Scandal Report by Skoob is the podcast for you. We will peel back the layers of deception that kept the truth hidden and reveal the real stories that rocked the nation. Plus, we'll dig into the tough questions: who's responsible and how did they get away with it? Download Skoob now. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to American Scandal Report to stay on top of America's darkest secrets. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because Chase Brandon was just the tip of the iceberg. What we're dealing with here isn't just one CIA officer with Hollywood ambitions. We're looking at a systematic infiltration of the entertainment industry by former intelligence operatives. The list of former CIA officers who have transitioned to entertainment roles is staggering. We've got John Strauchs associated with Sneakers, Henry Crumpton with State of Affairs, Rodney Farron with Black Hat, and Basil Baz with The Blacklist. Robert Baer has been involved with Red, Rendition, Syriana, and Berlin Station. Carol Raleigh Flynn and John McGaffin worked on Homeland. Tony and Jonna Mendez contributed to Argo and The Agency. The list goes on. Mike Baker with Spooks, Joe Weisberg with The Americans, Melissa Boyle Marler with Salt and Hannah, Valerie Plame with Fair Game and Person of Interest, Robert Grenier with Covert Affairs, Sandra Grimes and Jean Verdefeu with The Assets, Michael Wilson with Burn Notice, and Lindsay Moran with Cars 2, The Video Game. Yes, you heard that right. Even a Pixar sequel had CIA consultation. Here's the pattern that emerges when you look at these productions. They tend to endorse espionage themes and often portray the CIA in a positive light. They glorify extensive surveillance measures, justify the use of torture, or depict the world as fraught with pervasive threats. Shows like The Blacklist and Spooks employ a recurring format where new antagonists appear each week, suggesting that anyone could be a potential terrorist or notorious criminal. It's a worldview where constant vigilance is necessary, where civil liberties must be balanced against security concerns, and where the intelligence community serves as the thin blue line between civilization and chaos. And this worldview is being reinforced week after week, season after season, across multiple networks and streaming platforms. But here's the million-dollar question. Is there a systematic protocol requiring former CIA agents who engage in entertainment to have their projects reviewed and approved by the agency? While no explicit rule seems to exist, if such oversight is practiced, it would significantly expand the number of media productions that the CIA has influenced. Before we dive deeper into the modern implications of this relationship, let's take a step back and put this in historical context. Because what we're seeing today isn't entirely new. It's an echo of something that happened before, something that should serve as a warning. From 1947 to 1960, Hollywood experienced what became known as the Hollywood blacklist. During Senator Joseph McCarthy's Red Scare, thousands of Hollywood workers were labeled as communists and ostracized from the industry. The most notable victims were known as the Hollywood 10. This period of rampant fear and paranoia lacks substantial justification for national security concerns and has been extensively studied and critiqued in scholarly works. The FBI, particularly under J. Edgar Hoover's authoritative leadership, perpetuated these actions, continuing intensive scrutiny and control until Hoover's death in 1972. What we saw then was the use of government power to shape entertainment according to political ideology, punishing those who didn't conform and rewarding those who did. Now, I'm not saying we're seeing an exact repeat of the Hollywood blacklist. The methods are different, the ideology has shifted, and the mechanisms are more subtle. But the fundamental dynamic remains the same: powerful government agencies using their influence to shape how Americans understand their world through entertainment. The difference is that today's influence is largely voluntary. Instead of blacklisting uncooperative filmmakers, the CIA simply offers cooperation, access, and authenticity to those willing to present the agency in a favorable light. It's the carrot instead of the stick, but the result is the same: entertainment that serves the interests of the national security apparatus. Let's talk about some of the more troubling implications of this relationship. Because when we dig deeper into how the CIA has used Hollywood, we find examples that should make us all uncomfortable. Take the show 24, for instance. While this series touched on some controversial CIA practices like torture, it often portrayed such methods as yielding successful intelligence. In Season 4, Episode 18, the series dramatizes and rationalizes the use of extreme interrogation techniques by showing government agents as hindered by bureaucracy from extracting vital information, forcing protagonist Jack Bauer to take matters into his own hands. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a representation likely favored by elements within the CIA seeking to justify harsher interrogation techniques post 9/11. At a time when America was debating the ethics of enhanced interrogation, torture, and civil liberties, popular culture was providing a powerful argument for the dark side approach to national security. And here's where the influence becomes truly insidious. Research shows that fiction can be more powerful than fact in shaping public opinion. When people see Jack Bauer save Los Angeles by torturing a terrorist, it doesn't matter that real interrogation experts say torture is ineffective. The emotional impact of that fictional scenario can override rational analysis. This is what propaganda expert Randall Marlin describes as a deliberate, sustained effort aimed at influencing public thought and behavior in ways that often circumvent individuals' capacity to recognize when they are being influenced. Noam Chomsky argues that while it's possible for people to discern propaganda, it requires awareness and critical thinking skills that most entertainment consumers don't engage while watching TV. No discussion of CIA Hollywood collaboration would be complete without examining Zero Dark 30, the 2012 film about the hunt for Osama bin Laden. This movie represents perhaps the most controversial example of how the CIA's entertainment partnerships can cross ethical lines. It came to light months after the film's release that the CIA had influenced the movie's content to enhance its image. The agency provided unprecedented access to filmmakers, Catherine Bigelow and Mark Bowl, including briefings with top CIA officials and access to classified information about the bin Laden raid. But this collaboration came with a price. The film presented a version of events that reinforced several CIA talking points. That enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, played a crucial role in finding bin Laden, that the CIA was the primary hero of the operation, and that the agency's methods, however controversial, were ultimately justified by results. Senate Intelligence Committee investigations later revealed that many of these claims were false or misleading. Torture did not provide the key intelligence that led to bin Laden. The CIA was not the sole hero of the operation. But by the time these facts emerged, millions of Americans had already seen and internalized the CIA's preferred version of events. This is the power of entertainment as propaganda. A 2.5-hour movie can shape public understanding more effectively than years of congressional hearings and investigative journalism. And the CIA knew it. Our story extends beyond Hollywood into the broader media landscape. And this is where investigative journalist Nicholas Sko's work becomes crucial. In his book Spooked, Sko unveils the intricate and subtle methods by which the CIA influences media today. The tactics have evolved since the Cold War days when CIA operatives would frequently offer journalists alcohol and money. Today's approach is more sophisticated and arguably more effective. The current mode of operation involves providing journalists with invaluable favors, essential information, tips, and leaks from the secretive bureaucracy of the CIA. In an era where the media industry has downsized significantly and prestigious Washington journalism positions are highly competitive, these favors become crucial for maintaining a journalist's career. Ambitious journalists keen to ensure their career advancement have learned the importance of establishing good rapport with key individuals at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Skoob's investigation reveals how complicit the media have become with the agency, often neglecting to disclose their own ethical breaches and corrupt practices. Vital stories are concealed from the public, courageous journalists are punished, and risky national security decisions are made as the press increasingly becomes an accomplice to those in power. As this media manipulation becomes more entrenched, the concept of fact-based reality erodes. A fabricated world begins to dominate, and this trend is exacerbated by the public's increasing reliance on entertainment sources for news, a gap that Hollywood is perfectly positioned to fill. Let's step back and consider what we're really looking at here, because I think there's something even more sophisticated happening than simple propaganda or image management. Consider this. Some of the CIA's most successful Hollywood collaborations have actually portrayed the agency in a seemingly negative light. Take 3 Days of the Condor from 1975, a film that depicted the CIA as deadly adversaries. Yet former CIA Director Richard Helms not only accepted an invitation to the set, but engaged in extensive conversation with the film's star, Robert Redford. Years later, CIA General Counsel John Rizzo suggested that the agency may have provided support for the film. He noted that it accurately depicted the cadence of real CIA operations and that some scenes closely resembled actual CIA facilities. How did filmmakers capture such authenticity without official guidance? Here's the fascinating part. In a key scene, Robert Redford's character listens to a pragmatic justification for the agency's activities. The supposedly criminal actions of the CIA are ultimately rationalized under the premise that only the agency can secure the continuous supply of oil crucial for national survival. If the CIA sanctioned such seemingly harsh portrayals, it suggests something more sophisticated than simple image management. It suggests a deliberate strategy to shape public expectations about what intelligence agencies do and why they're necessary, even when those activities are morally questionable. The message becomes, yes, we do dark things, but someone has to do them to keep you safe. It's a more nuanced form of propaganda that acknowledges criticism while ultimately justifying the enterprise. Today, this collaboration between the CIA and Hollywood has become institutionalized. In 1977, the CIA established an Office of Public Affairs, marking a new era of openness in the agency's public relations approach. CBS became the first news organization allowed to film within CIA headquarters, and the low-budget movie Telephone received similar permissions. Fast forward to today, and we see productions like Homeland, Argo, and others where individuals involved willingly extend supervisory privileges and offer screen credits to CIA personnel. In exchange, they receive perks like exclusive tours of CIA facilities and interactions with top CIA officials. Meanwhile, content that challenges the CIA's perspective or exposes national security transgressions rarely gets produced, and when it does, these projects struggle for airtime and are quickly overlooked due to lackluster marketing support. This creates a feedback loop where the stories that get told, the narratives that reach the largest audiences, and the perspectives that shape public understanding are increasingly aligned with the interests of the national security apparatus. As we near the end of our investigation, we're left with some troubling questions about accountability and transparency in a democratic society. When Tom Cruise met with CIA officials to ensure Mission Impossible that cast the agency favorably, was the public informed of these meetings? When Chase Brandon suggested storylines for the agency that eerily predicted real-world events, were viewers told they were watching CIA-influenced content? When former CIA officers work as consultants on major Hollywood productions, are audiences made aware of these connections? The answer to all these questions is generally no. The influence operates in the shadows, shaping perception without acknowledgement, affecting understanding without disclosure. This raises fundamental questions about informed consent in a democratic society. How can citizens make informed decisions about national security policies if their understanding of those policies is being shaped by undisclosed government influence in their entertainment? So, where does this leave us? We're living in an era where the lines between entertainment, information, and propaganda have become increasingly blurred. The CIA has learned that it's far more effective to shape public opinion through popular culture than through press releases or congressional testimony. And the strategy is working. Polls consistently show that Americans have a more favorable view of the CIA than other government agencies, despite decades of documented abuses and failures. Much of this positive perception can be traced to the agency's successful cultivation of its image through entertainment. But knowledge is power, and awareness is the first step toward accountability. Now that you know how this machine operates, you can't unknow it. The next time you watch a spy thriller or a historical drama, you'll find yourself asking, who had input on this story? What perspective is being promoted? What questions aren't being asked? This isn't about becoming cynical or paranoid about entertainment. It's about becoming a more critical consumer of information, regardless of how that information is packaged. It's about understanding that in the 21st century, the battle for hearts and minds isn't fought just in newspapers and news broadcasts. It's fought in theaters, on streaming platforms, and in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we stand for. The relationship between Hollywood and the CIA reveals something profound about power in America. It shows us how influence operates in ways that are legal, sophisticated, and largely invisible. It demonstrates how democratic discourse can be shaped by forces that operate outside traditional democratic accountability. As we move forward, the challenge for citizens, journalists, and creators will be to maintain awareness of these influences while preserving the creative freedom and entertainment value that make these stories compelling in the first place. Because ultimately, this isn't just about movies and TV shows. It's about the stories we tell ourselves as a society, the narratives that shape our understanding of right and wrong, and the hidden hands that guide those narratives. The next time you settle in for that Friday night movie, remember, you're not just being entertained, you're being educated, influenced, and perhaps even recruited. The question is, by whom and for what purpose? That's something worth thinking about long after the credits roll. I'm your host, Oz Dalton, and this has been American Scandal Report. Thank you for joining me as we uncovered some of the most shocking and hidden stories in American history. If this episode made you think, question, or crave more truth, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. And for those of you hungry for more gripping, bite-sized stories about corruption, cover-ups, shady businesses, and the secret operations that shaped a nation, check out Skoob, your AI-powered podcast studio app. Download it now from the App Store or Play Store and start exploring America's darkest secrets faster, deeper, and smarter.